Hi everyone. So my name is Fabian Torres, and I'm conducting our second student spotlight interview for SHPE UIC. And here we have bioengineer Rudy Calderon, and he'll be telling us a little bit more about his journey in STEM and why he's decided to do what he's doing, and just a bit more about himself. So, Rudy, go ahead. You can introduce yourself.
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Rudy Calderon, currently a senior studying bioengineering here at UIC, and I'm this year's secretary for SHIP UIC as well.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess we'll just get straight into it. So, question number one is going to be, why did you choose to pursue STEM? And, what's your story behind what you're studying right now? Or, how you got to it?
Yeah, sure. I think during high school, especially during my junior and senior years, I was a part of the IB program, which um, that kind of forced me to take the same classes both my junior and senior year. So I was pretty much immersed in the same content for a span of 2 years. So when it came time to look for universities or colleges and majors, I was always kind of lost. I wasn't really too sure what to pick. There's a lot of options to pick from. And I didn't have like a specific subject that I was completely in love with. So it was always kind of tough to channel into what I was specifically leaning towards, because I knew this was very much like a first step into my career, I guess, and taking something seriously after, as an adult. So when it came time to deciding, I was very much conflicted between stuff like political science, which I thought was pretty cool at the time, potentially going for like arts. I just had like, through those classes, I had a lot of exposure to different subjects, so much that I wasn't too sure what I was the most interested in. But I know for sure, um, I believe it was my junior year, I was in my bio class. And so I think at some point we reached the chapter that was related to stem cells, and that like the engineering focused around that. So the concept of biology then became probably the most attractive to me. And so I started looking into it and looking into like biology degrees and whatnot, and what else is surrounding, that type of science. Um, but I think something that I saw later on was like bioengineering, and that just seems so cool. Thinking of like Iron Man-esque, modifications and like adding all these stuff to your body. I think like Apple Watches were popping off at that point, and I was very much interested in that tech, and that like interaction between user and computer. So that seemed really cool to me, and I think the more and more I kind of learned about what you could do there, and the kind of classes offered at specifically at UIC, I was like, all right, cool, it seems like a good pick. So that's kind of why I just committed to bioengineering. I was also kind of always growing around with like my parents, always tinkering with like stuff at home and kind of making things work and stuff. So kind of always like spectating my dad kind of tinkering with like a car or like any sort of appliance around the house, and always myself tinkering with like menus and stuff. I was like, oh, engineering would be cool to kind of get an understanding of like the ins and outs of anything really, and kind of being able to like figure it out by just troubleshooting and testing and doing that little types of things. So yeah, I guess that previous, like my youth being like that person always kind of mess with like all the types of electronics around the house, and also just that bio that kicked in my late high school career. I think those intersected and became kind of why I picked bioengineering.
Yeah, I mean, I know personally from my high school days too. It's bio was something I was kind of interested in too at first. I know for sure I like when it came to sciences, I was never a chemistry type of person. I love bio though, so I totally feel on that part. In terms of like watching your parents kind of like fix things around the house, you talk a little bit more about that. Actually, I'm kind of curious.
Sure, yeah. So I think um, I have a lot of examples that just come to my head with that. But my dad was always like, I'm gonna fix this up. Like, oh, I'm gonna like redo our like walkway on our backyard, or oh, hey, I'm going to like fix some electric issue that's happening. There was always something around the house that he was kind of like eager to like fix or improve. Um, so kind of just always being like, oh, I'll help you, and like going, and he's like, here, hold the flashlight, and kind of just like watching him do stuff. I think that's kind of like where I guess my mentality of like, oh, let me figure out how this works kind of kicked in, I guess. I kind of, without necessarily being so conscious of it, but indirectly, I think his eagerness to kind of, improve something around the house so often kind of rubbed up on me and wanting to know how these things work, and being like, I guess, seeing him kind of try everything out and like wanting to like, oh, do a bit of electric work, or oh, let me do some yard work, or let me go fix this thing. All those little types of side projects always kind of, I guess, influence me to want to know how to do stuff like that as well, and always kind of be quick on my feet when it comes to like tinkering with something, or I guess having that eagerness to just jump into an issue and be like, all right, let's fix it, because who else is gonna fix it, type of deal.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty cool because I feel like a lot of people nowadays, especially because like systems are getting more like complex more than ever and stuff like that, are kind of afraid to delve into stuff themselves. They think, "Oh, I'm going to break it," or "Oh, like I don't know what I'm doing," and all that stuff. But it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of fun, like kind of refreshing um when you hear people who do take those risks like anyway, because the truth is I feel like the first time you do anything like that, the first time you might mess up. You'll probably mess up, but you
Yeah.
if failure is not an option, then success in it isn't either. You can't
Mm-hmm.
just get something right the first time all the time. If that were the case, why bother doing it all? Why
Right.
bother doing it much more than that?
No, yeah, agreed.
But yeah, I mean, sounds like you had a pretty good foundation for why you went into that. All right.
Partially, I think most of it synced in after making the choice, and that's kind of when like that reflection kicked in. I was like, oh, maybe it was because of these reasons, but it was all worked in the background. It all kind of cooked up on its own.
Yeah, I agree. Like some of the reasons you do things, like you don't realize you're conscious up until like after the fact, or you don't realize like, okay, why did I do this until after the fact? So yeah, I agree. Okay, so then I guess we'll jump into our second question. Uh, what impact do you feel that studying engineering or STEM has had on you as a person in terms of like mentally, like or academically, any other aspects of your life?
That's a good question. At least right now, I think heading into this field has definitely created like some weight on my shoulders. Just the amount of work that we have at hand nowadays, and just everything being virtual. There's a lot of fatigue attached to it. But I think, long term, it definitely will pay off. I would say. It's kind of hard to say that now, just because we're kind of all going through it in one shape, way, or form. But I definitely do think that this type of study is very, insightful. A lot of it is foundational. So, we learn a lot about, all these different scientists who discovered these formulas and, established this basis. But a lot of it is also a window into the future, and kind of like showing us a preview of like, all right, this is all that has been done previously, especially something like computer science. That's kind of the precious thing in my head. It's such a new thing. Even though it's been around for decades, it's such a new thing that, you learn up to a point, and it's like, all right, now you show us what you got for us, because, this is still very new. And I think that applies to a lot of other science, like bioengineering, mechanical engineering. You learn a lot of these basics on, here are the rules, and here's kind of what has been done before, but here you go. Here's the tools that you need to set this even further and create the future. So I think a lot of it is pretty motivational in its own sense. That we are giving these tools, and being prepared for us to just go off and set that new standard. And I think that's something that, despite all the amount of work that we have and the amount of stress and sleepless nights, I think ultimately that's kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel. That's like, this is for, not only for ourselves to improve ourselves and whatnot, but also we're gonna end up giving back in some way, shape, or form to, this knowledge that we picked up from, and also potentially to other people with, building better things and discovering, better ways to work with things. I think ultimately that's kind of my push factor to keep going with everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you actually say that. That you say like, for example, like the whole aspect of basically how they teach STEM in schools. I totally agree because I didn't realize it until maybe like a year ago, or until maybe even this year a little bit more. But yeah, that's the way they basically teach us like science, engineering, like STEM principles. Is they'll say, yeah, there's here's what has worked for us in the past. Here's what these people went through to
Right.
discover this, to maybe arrive to this conclusion, to basically make all these like laws and foundations and like develop these algorithms and stuff like that. And here's what we're doing now. Um, basically, like who's gonna develop the next big thing, or who's gonna make some big new discovery, and get their name in the books. But yeah, I mean, I that's interesting, and it's just yeah, I feel like that in itself is also like yeah, like you said, it's motivating. It's kind of inspirational. But that
And I guess that's something that, like you said, I think I only kind of started realizing that this year, my last year here, because at this point, I think most of us are kind of, we do have some classes in here or there that are very much like learning, but a lot of them are like labs or stuff that we're actually applying, like what we've learned, like finally what we learned for the past 4 years. Like here's like go crazy, apply it to the specific project, or I guess like senior design, which is where like our final one of our final group-based classes where we create solutions basically for problems that are given to us. So at this point, it's like, all right, put all of the stuff you learned together into this final project. And I think that's where I kind of started realizing that that's the case. Like, oh, okay, like now we're kind of setting, using the tools that we were taught to, create something new and kind of push that even further.
yeah, exactly. Like I mean, that for sure is like it's scary. I think it's a little scary at first because you're like, because you're basically tasked with creating something that doesn't already exist. If
Right.
that's the case, and then you have to think of like how every little aspect in your project, for example, in senior design, how every little aspect comes together. Not only at the technical level, not only knowing how to implement this on a technical level, but how to lay it out like logically and how to like plan things according to plan, like creating an actual like plan of action. And that sometimes is even can be even harder than the technical part, and that's something I think a lot of engineers don't realize.
For sure. Yeah, a lot of it is what you know, but yeah, you're right. I think a good piece is making sure that, because you're working in a team, you have to make sure everyone's on the same page and everyone's like ready to move at that pace. So, um, definitely, I mean, it makes sense that it's one of the last classes we take just because it's such a, you know, bunching together of everything, including like our social skills and being able to manage those types of workloads. So, um, yeah, I mean, it's a very compact class. Everything's kind of there.
Yeah. It's like I guess the culmination of our undergraduate like
Hmm.
soft skills and technical skills sort of thing, just kind of mashing them up into one and then saying, here, let's see what you can do, and that sort of thing.
Right.
But
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, it's a very interesting response actually. I actually really like that response.
Oh, thank you.
um okay, so then we'll jump into question number 3. How can we make STEM more accessible to younger audiences and encourage them to pursue a career in STEM? Um, and like I said, this can be with reference to minorities, underrepresented groups, or just younger audiences in general. So, like kids in grade schools, etc.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, coming from working with outreach previously in previous years, through SHIP, I think, and even, throughout my elementary school days, I think a lot of it came down to like having access to, these new technologies or, whatever the case may be. I feel like a lot of it comes down to access, where a lot of people who are in a more privileged position do get access to, better teaching, better resources, better technology. So they're always kind of in the forefront of like, oh, this is what this new piece of tech does. Oh, this is we can do science experiments and stuff. But, I think of, even for myself growing up, in elementary school, it was always like, obviously, we did learn about science and stuff, but, we didn't have like microscopes. We didn't have like anything like, anything that necessarily felt like we were at the cutting edge of learning stuff. And I feel like, now being older, I can kind of see and see that, there is kind of a discrepancy in the amount of funding certain schools get and stuff. But besides all that, I think even within Chef, we have a lot of power in making sure that we give schools that don't have that access to knowing what's out there, and even kind of exposing them to like us ourselves as a resource. Like, hey, we are the youth's connection to what science is now, and kind of making them aware that STEM fields are possible. Look at us here sitting and on these screens. Look at us studying in school. Look at us wanting to come and talk to you guys because we think it's important. So I think outreach specifically within SHIP does a really good job at, or not even just outreach. I think everyone in SHIP has that mission in mind where it's like, all right, we made it to this point. Let's make sure that we're able to set up that bridge behind us, and making sure that the next generations and the generation after that are aware that this can happen. Even though we thought it was so unquestionably like not a path. I think the fact that we were able to get here is very inspiring to all of us, and all of us are willing to lay down that bridge. So, yeah, I mean, I think it really just comes down to making sure that everyone has access to it. And I think programs like Noche de Ciencias and the Yes Initiative within UIC, and a lot of the other outreach kind of events that happen, help bridge that path and make sure that students, whether they're privileged or not, have this access to this knowledge and kind of our experiences, to make sure that they have the ability to gain interest, but also be exposed to STEM fields and pursue more if they'd like to.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know, I'm really glad you also mentioned ship into that question as well, because I mean, yeah, like that's another thing that also does surprise me too, is that um I don't know, like college has also passed me kind of fast, and at the beginning of it I was like, oh my god, I don't know anything. I like,
Right.
how can I possibly like become like an engineer and like actually work in a field and like be,
Mm-hmm.
you know, do all this stuff. But now that I'm a little bit more mature, and I've passed all these classes, I've done all the work, and I'm a senior. I want to. I also have the desire to like give back to people as well, and our organization is literally like dedicated to doing that, giving back to our community. Um,
Right.
Not only, like you said, of course, through outreach and younger audiences, but people like us as well, or even the professionals. So it's like it's giving back in every single, I guess, category.
Like chapter, right, of everyone's life. Yeah, like even like for myself, I think I knew of SHIP going into UIC through just hearing about it, but I never actually became involved up until like my late sophomore year, maybe early junior year. So even then, like once I started stepping more and more into this sphere, um, it just eye opening. Like, oh hey, look at the types of jobs you can get. Hey, look how this is how we're helping you prepare to make sure that you're able to land those interviews and get your foot in the door. So even in our stages of our lives, I think there's still that path for us to be sought, to be reached out to and helped. Um, so going through that, I think even makes me want to give back even more and make sure that whether it be a freshman coming in or be eighth graders looking to think about what they want to do as when they grow up. I think there's a lot to do to make sure that we give back and make sure we feed into that loop, to encourage others to follow our steps.
Yeah, I agree. It's like I said, well, like you said, actually, it's just, yeah, like you said, giving people the resources and basically informing them of like what's out there. Because when I was in grade school, like I didn't know what an engineer was. I didn't know there were all these different types of engineers. I didn't
Right.
know. I just knew that, for example, like me personally, I liked like video games, I like computers, I like technology, but I didn't know there was like an actual field dedicating to like, oh, like making things better in that field and like all that stuff. So I think, yeah, like you
Right.
said, accessibility is like absolutely pretty huge. Just letting
Right. And
people
that's like
know.
exactly, and you mentioned that, and it just brings up memories of like needing to write some sort of story in fifth grade or something, and they're like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I was like, "Video game designer," and I think like 10 other kids wrote down like video game design. And it's like funny because that is a position, but what fifth grader is gonna tell you, "I want to be a front end software developer." Like that's like you don't. I again, there's so much grayness, and sometimes it's fine, at that age to like have such a like
Such a vague
general
image.
view. Right. Sometimes it's fine. You don't have to know the specifics then, but it's good for them to be like, meet you in 5 years and be like, hey, I am a software developer for, I don't know, X company, and I do this specific thing. and this can be you. And that kind of paints a better picture of like, oh wow, you can do that. Like, is that something I'm interested in? Am I more interested into another type of position? And kind of just making it more clearly laid out for them to be like, okay, this is the path I need to take to make sure I get to this specific role because that's exactly what I want to do. Versus, living your whole life thinking you want to be a video game designer, which is fine, but like keeping something very general and then getting there and it's like, oh wow, I didn't even really know what that meant, and now I don't want to do it. And kind of just being stuck, kind of following something that you didn't know so much about, and decided that you weren't so interested in. So, um, like providing that clarity on our end definitely, I think, is could be beneficial for people to either pursue STEM and be like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do, or be like, maybe that's not what I want to do. I want to focus on something on this other piece, and then, identify what that path looks like.
Yeah, I'm I'm glad you say that too, because it's like I said, up until like I said high school, I really didn't actually have a clear cut idea of what I wanted to do in technology. I didn't know if I wanted to do engineering. I didn't know if I wanted to do IT. I didn't know if I wanted to just become I don't know, just like a technician for like computers. I had no idea, but I think it's like super important to not only, like you said, like give back to the community by like visiting, telling kids that hey, this is what I do and this opportunity is out there for you. But I guess to repeatedly do that, because I think in maybe once in like third or fourth grade, I did hear about like engineers, right? But it was maybe once, and of course when I was a little bit older, I didn't remember that at all, and I didn't really keep it
Right.
in mind when I was thinking about jobs and stuff like that. So I feel like it's super important to like repeatedly keep at it, basically, so that you're not only fostering the new generation like by going every 1 or 2 years to like your old school or something like that, but maybe try to go back more often to show these kids like hey, and then they'll get the idea by seeing it more often that like yeah, like this is a realistic path, and they talk to you more and more, and they get a way better idea of of what it is that you actually do and whether they would like to do it. And if not,
Yeah.
it opens up a world of options for them. At least they have way more understanding of like what it is.
Right. And I think you may be onto something. I might hold on to that idea and cook it up with outreach and stuff. I think you might be onto something with making something more continuous. Something more intimate where you can actually get to continuously, expose what this is to students. So I'll have to see if that's possible now.
Yeah, I mean, I that's just honestly what I think. Like because, like I said, I was exposed to it maybe once or twice, but I didn't know it was that because it was only once or twice. So if you do it more
Right.
repeatedly, like for example, like your parents, like you grow up around your parents, and you always ask them like, what do you do? What do you do at work and stuff? And you get a really clear picture of what they do because you're always talking to them. But you know, like I said, you just know more of what you're surrounded with.
Right.
So I guess this will jump into our final question. Is there any additional advice that you would like to give to people who are planning to pursue a career in STEM or are currently studying STEM?
Ooh, that's a good question. Advice.
It could be personal advice, it could be like advice about how to manage your academics, it could be anything.
Right. I mean, I guess I'm trying to think of like if there's one piece of advice that I would have to give. I mean, it really depends. If I'm speaking to someone going into bioengineering, I can give you like a whole spiel on, what types of classes are good and, the order you should take stuff. I guess I'm just trying to think of how to like generally put something, I guess for people who are excited about STEM. So I guess on that note, my piece of advice for people, or high school students or anyone looking into starting their academic career in STEM would be, I don't know. I mean, I guess I think something that I even would like to hear myself is that this hard classes where some of this material is completely confusing and doesn't make sense. That's really how it's gonna be. There's a lot of people that in the same classes that are probably as clueless. Like myself, I feel like I've always kind of like hit a point in some of my classes where I'm just like, yeah, I don't know what they're saying anymore. And very early on, I think I just, from high school, I think I came in with the idea of like, oh, I'm always kind of working on my own homework. I'm always working on my own things. Like it's fine. Like I'll figure it out. Um, but I think truly, what I came to realize is that having, seeking help when needed is definitely the way to go about classes in college because the stuff is harder. You do get smarter over the years, of course, but the content sometimes, overcomes you and is harder before you reach that level of intelligence. So it's like, I remember like very early on in my chemistry classes, I was like, I ended up struggling at some point and I was like, man, I'll figure it out. I'll make it work like I always did in high school. I always thought I would be able to do it. But the more and more I went through the class, the more and more my grades started slipping, and I'm like, man, this is not what I want to happen. So I think at that point I was like, yeah, maybe I do need to like ask someone for help. And every class has office hours, which is basically a teaching assistant who has this dedicated time to help you specifically with homework assignments or with concepts. So I think that was when I started finally like taking advantage of that. Probably like the end of my second year of college. And so at that point I was like, oh wow, like this actually really did help me. So I guess moral there, I mean, for anyone who's starting to pursue STEM, just make sure you establish or are aware of the types of help that you can get. Because truthfully, I feel like the level of difficulty that college came at me with was somewhat expected, but still surprising to be like, oh man, that guy really had to stay on top of like 5 different classes, which again, in high school you have maybe like 6 classes, so you think it's easy, but the work does pile up and it is, it does keep you busy, and then you're trying to do clubs and stuff. So there's always like, you're always pressed for time and you always kind of end up like rushing through things sometimes. So making sure that you seek the help to make sure that you understand the stuff is definitely a good tip. And I would suggest everyone, when you start your semesters, just to make note of, who you have access to, who you can reach out to make sure that you do whenever you hit these roadblocks. Because otherwise, I think you just end up dragging behind a bit, and you may make it through, but it's good to always reinforce that knowledge and make sure that you're not falling behind.
Yeah, I think I agree like pretty heavily with pretty much everything you said. It's just yeah, like I that's what I noticed too. Even with being at home, during this last semester or these last couple like this semester and probably next semester, um, it's just you're still pressed for time. Like you still have to manage 4 or 5 classes, maybe six. You have to basically manage like a full schedule like
Right.
that. And there's a certain caliber they want you to focus on these classes in college. In high school, it's like, okay, you can maybe know like surface level knowledge and maybe memorize enough to do well on the test. But here, it's like you need to definitely give it way more effort than you did before
Yeah.
in every single one of your classes. So it's not just okay, you need to give effort to like one class and then the rest of them are kind of blow offs. It's like no, it's like all of them you have to dedicate a good amount and chunk of time to not only know the material, to like understand it and to like know it inside out, backwards, forwards, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that you have to manage a full schedule. You got to manage your personal life, and like you
Exactly.
said, everything outside of it. So it's just you're gonna be it's time consuming. That's for sure.
It's time consuming, and I guess just a smaller tip there is just start these time etiquette routines early. Start like making these little mini schedules for yourself. This is homework time, this is gaming time. It's good to have a balance and just make sure that you start establishing those routines early on, because I feel like in high school I was always like, all right, I got out of school, rush through my homework maybe, and then I would just like game all night or something. um and in college I think I tried doing the same early on, and I'm just like, I'll do the homework later, I'll do this and that. But then one class assigns homeworks on Thursdays, one class assigns homeworks on Wednesdays every other week, and at some point it all just like comes at you at once and an exam, and and it's like, oh man, I should have probably prepped earlier. And then once you get behind that one step, early in the semester, and at that point you're already like behind the rest because you're just playing catch up. Um, and I'm saying this from a place that where I'm still going through that myself. Um, so I think it's very important to set those habits early, so to make sure that when you reach your fourth year of undergrad and you're having these heavy duty classes on your schedule, you're able to retain those routines to make sure that you stay on top of your stuff better than you would not. I mean, you still might fall off, you still might have some issues, but having some sort of mental prep where it's like, all right, it's fine, I'll just have to schedule myself this and this way, helps to make sure that you're able to get the stuff done.
Yeah, I think I just want to add one more note onto that too,
Mm-hmm.
because I like you said, I like that you said that it still happens like in your fourth year. Like
Yeah.
it still happens to me too. It's not that it won't happen, right? I think it's almost inevitable that at some point in time in your engineering career, you're probably gonna fall behind in a class or two or maybe a couple. But
Yeah.
as a freshman, you aren't exactly used to this, and it's just it's overwhelming to you. So I understand totally if you freak out a little bit or maybe you don't handle it the best way. But the biggest hope, at least for that I would think, is just that when it happens to you later, you get better at handling that sort of thing, or you're at least more used to it. So maybe the anxiety or the stress of it is just not enough to overwhelm you, and you can manage it a little better.
Right, you're conditioning yourself for, just to make sure you don't completely fall on your feet, off of your feet. It still happens, I think different classes deliver that different workload, but like you said, yeah, a lot of it is just making sure that you're able to pick yourself back up and keep going with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's kind of the moral of the story that I found with like engineering in general. It's not necessarily that things get easier. It's just that you become better conditioned to handle like those situations so that when you do get those harder problems and you get those really hard like assignments and stuff like that, um, it's it doesn't become nearly as bad to handle as if maybe when you were a freshman and you're given these problems and stuff like that. So yeah.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think really it's just that you get used to the workload and you're more accustomed to it.
hmm
But yeah, do you have any other questions, comments, concerns you want to add on? Any closing comments?
I'm trying to think. I'm not too sure. I guess, just to wrap up, um, I don't know. I guess to anyone who is thinking about pursuing in STEM, I think you go in, realize, hearing that um, this is a field that never runs out of jobs. You're always going to have a job straight out of college. And although most cases it is true, um, some people do it because they're truly like invested in, I want to program the next, iPhone and work with iOS and do all this type of thing, or some people simply do it because they know they're going to get a job at the end of the tunnel. Um, but, I think regardless of what that intention is, I think, we pretty much talked about this already, but the stuff is hard. To some people, it's surprising. Some people just come super easy. They breeze through the classes and they're always on top of their stuff, at least, from face value, from what we see. But I would imagine that they also have a packed schedule. They're working all day and trying to make sure that they, put up this appearance that they're doing well. So I guess, going into undergrad, don't be intimidated by not only the challenges that you have ahead of yourself, but also, others' success and others' apparent, understanding of the stuff. Don't feel like you're kind of like, oh man, I'm the, odd one out. I'm the one falling behind. Because I can guarantee that there are 50 other people in that room who are also in that same boat where they're like, oh man, they could be looking at you and be like, man, that guy's on top of it. I need to pick my stuff up. And a lot of it feeds into that imposter syndrome, which I guess is what I'm trying to get into. It is intimidating to go into these fields, especially as, Latinx folks. Thankfully UIC, a lot of Latinx representation is there. A lot of other representation is there. But, some places, some settings, you might feel like the odd one out. Um, but don't let that be the deterrent. There's a lot of opportunities out there, and success only comes from what you put into it. So definitely, go off, give it your best, and just go get that prize at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. Um, that's about the best advice I think you can give everyone. Like just
Yeah.
don't let other people tear down your dreams, and don't let other people influence you. Just do what you want to do. But yeah, thank you for your time, Rudy.
Thank you for your time, Fabian. I really appreciate this, and I look forward to tuning into the rest of these videos. Hopefully, we'll see more coming in soon.
Yes, we will. All right. See ya.
See you, Fabian. Bye.